I hadn't seen Daisy in over 10 years, but the second I opened the door, I knew it was her. Just not the version I remembered. Her hair was a mess, stringy and tangled. Her jacket hung off her shoulders like it didn't belong to her, or maybe like nothing really belonged to her anymore. Her eyes were sunken, her lips cracked. She looked like someone who'd slept in a car for weeks and hadn't eaten in days. "Mike," she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. For a second, I just stood there. I didn't say a word, didn't breathe. I couldn't even move. I had imagined this moment more times than I could count, but I never thought it would happen for real. My name's Mike Turner. I'm 42 years old. I live just outside Columbus, Ohio, and I run a contracting company I built from the ground up. I've got a small place, nothing fancy, but it's clean, it's paid off, and it's mine. The last time I saw Daisy was the day our divorce was finalized. She was wearing a red dress and sunglasses too big for her face. She held hands with Bruce, yeah, that Bruce, and never even looked at me as they walked out of the courthouse. And now here she was. "I need help," she said, her voice cracking. She looked down at her hands, and that's when I saw it. Bruises. Faded, old ones on her wrists. Newer ones near her elbow. There was something in her posture too, like she was always bracing for impact. I felt a weird knot tighten in my stomach. Anger? Pity? Maybe both. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She looked up, her eyes glassy. "Just a place to stay. A few days. I'll leave after that. I promise." I wanted to slam the door in her face. I wanted to tell her to go to Bruce, or the friends she left me for, or whoever was next in the long line of bad decisions she made after she walked out on me. But instead, I opened the door wider and stepped aside. She hesitated like she didn't believe it was real. Then she stepped in slowly, careful not to touch anything, like even the furniture would judge her. I poured her a glass of water and set it down on the coffee table. She clutched it like it was something sacred. "I left him," she said quietly. "A year ago." I didn't say anything. I just sat on the edge of the recliner, arms crossed, watching her. "He wasn't who I thought he was," she continued. "At first, he was charming, gentle, but that didn't last. He drank. He hit me. He took everything. Money, time, people. He even made me cut off my own mother. And now what?" I asked. "You want sympathy? After everything?" "No," she said quickly. "Just rest. A roof. I don't expect anything else." I looked at her again. Not the woman I married. Not the one who cheated on me with Bruce. Not the one who vanished from my life without a trace. She was something else now. Broken. Hollowed out. And I realized I didn't feel what I thought I'd feel. No victory. No satisfaction. Just a heavy sense of, I don't know. Closure. Maybe. "You can stay," I said. "But just for a few nights." She nodded. "Thank you." She didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She just closed her eyes for a second, like someone who finally stopped running. I didn't know what came next, but I had a feeling this wasn't going to be simple. Not by a long shot. And for the first time in years, the past wasn't just a memory. It was sitting on my couch. The next morning, I made coffee. Black. Strong. The way I always drank it. Daisy sat at the kitchen table, her back straight, like she was trying to avoid sinking into the chair. She hadn't slept much, I could tell. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. Just from exhaustion. Maybe the kind that comes from years of bad choices, years of letting things slide until they crush you. I didn't know what to say, so I just handed her the coffee. She looked up, as if she hadn't expected it, but took it without a word. I was still pissed at her. Still angry. But I wasn't going to be cruel about it. At least, not yet. "Thanks," she muttered, barely looking at me. We sat in silence for a while. I tried not to notice the way she fidgeted, rubbing her thumb over the chipped mug. Her hands trembled, just a little. I wasn't sure if it was from nerves or something else. Finally, I couldn't stand the quiet anymore. "So, what happened?" I asked, my voice cold. "You left him. You said you did, but you haven't told me why." Her eyes flickered up to mine, and then she quickly looked away. She took a slow sip of the coffee, the steam rising in the morning light, but I could tell she wasn't really drinking it. She was stalling. "Bruce," she started, her voice breaking a little. "He wasn't who I thought he was. He told me I was the problem, that I was the one who made him drink, made him angry. I believed it for a while. But then it kept getting worse. Every day. Every damn day." I leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, trying to stay as detached as possible. "And the money? What about that? You said he took everything." She winced, her eyes darting down to the table. He did. It's hard to explain. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. He had this way of making me feel like I owed him everything. Like I wasn't allowed to have anything for myself. I snorted, shaking my head. That sounds familiar. You've always been good at making people feel guilty. She didn't flinch at the jab. In fact, she looked resigned. I know I screwed up. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to hurt you, Mike. But I did. And I didn't know how to fix it. The words hung there, suspended between us. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't even looking for it. But there was something in her voice, a plea for understanding, even if it was just a little. Something I hadn't expected. Did you even try? I asked. Try to fix it? After everything? Her hands tightened around the mug. She stared at it like she was trying to make sense of the coffee swirling inside. I didn't know how. I thought it would get better. But it didn't. I clenched my jaw, my anger flaring again. You think I don't know what that's like? You think I don't know what it feels like to be stuck in something that drains you until you don't even recognize yourself? She flinched at my words, and I immediately regretted the harsh tone. But it was too late. I had opened the door, and all the bitterness came rushing through. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. But I did. And I'm sorry. I rubbed my forehead, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Sorry? Sorry isn't going to fix everything, Daisy. You can't just show up after all these years and expect me to forget what you did. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Shame? Maybe both. I don't expect you to. I don't even expect you to want to help me. But I don't have anywhere else to go. I let out a breath, my frustration turning into something else, something heavier. You could have gone to your mom, or your friends, or anyone. But you came here. Why? Her voice was barely audible. Because I thought maybe you'd understand. I thought maybe you'd help me. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process everything she was saying, trying to figure out if she was telling the truth, or if this was just another one of her attempts to manipulate me. But there was something in her face that made me hesitate. I had a lot of reasons to turn her away. Hell, I had a lot of reasons to slam the door in her face and never speak to her again. But something stopped me. I pushed myself off the counter, standing up straight. You can stay, I said, my voice flat. For now. But don't expect anything more. You're not going to get sympathy from me. She nodded, her eyes downcast. I don't expect that. I don't deserve it. The silence settled again, but this time it wasn't as uncomfortable. It was just heavy. We were both broken in different ways. And for the first time in years, I wondered if maybe we could start to piece things back together, if only for a little while. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It never was with Daisy, and I wasn't sure I was ready to dive back into that mess. I turned to walk out of the room, but then I paused, glancing back at her. You can stay here as long as you need to, but don't think this means we're going to talk about the past. Not yet. She didn't argue. She didn't even look up. She just nodded again. Thanks, she whispered, and I could hear the relief in her voice. But even as I left the room, a part of me knew this was just the beginning. And whatever happened next, it wasn't going to be simple. It was going to be messy. Just like everything else with Daisy. The days started blending together. Daisy had settled into the guest room, but I could tell she wasn't comfortable. She kept to herself, rarely leaving the room except to use the bathroom or grab a meal. I didn't mind the distance. In fact, I preferred it. We both knew we were walking on thin ice, and the last thing I wanted was to do something stupid and invite the past back into my life. Still, it was strange. The house felt quieter, less cluttered with the ghosts of old arguments and bitter memories. I'd wake up early, get my usual workout in, and then drive out to the site. My job was demanding, but it gave me something to focus on, something I could control. My employees respected me. Hell, some of them probably looked at me like a father figure. And I liked it that way. I was good at it. I'd built this business on my own, and I wasn't about to let anyone screw it up. But when I came back home at the end of the day, Daisy was still there. Sometimes she was watching TV. Sometimes she was just sitting in the living room, staring at nothing. Every time I walked through the door, I felt that same old frustration creeping up again. Why was I letting her stay? Why was I letting her back in when I knew she was just going to disappoint me again? One night, after I made dinner, just some basic spaghetti and meatballs, I sat down to eat alone, like usual. Daisy came out from the guest room, looking hesitant, like she wasn't sure whether she should join me. For a second, I almost said nothing, like I had been doing all week. But I couldn't ignore the way she looked at me, like she was waiting for permission. Sit down, I muttered, pushing my plate aside. She hesitated, but eventually pulled out the chair across from me. She didn't say anything, just looked at the food, then at me, then back at the plate. Thanks for letting me stay, she said, her voice soft. I know it's not easy for you. I didn't look at her. I just picked up my fork and stabbed at a meatball. It's fine. She was quiet for a moment before taking a bite, but I could tell she wasn't really eating. I could feel her eyes on me. I could feel the weight of everything hanging between us, like this was some silent standoff. The old tension I'd spent so long trying to bury, it was still there. I was still angry, still hurt, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. Mike, she said after a long pause, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I messed up. I know you probably hate me. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Hate her? Yeah, it was pretty damn close. I don't hate you, I muttered, putting my fork down. I'm just tired of dealing with your shit. She flinched, her eyes welling up with something. Guilt, maybe. I don't blame you. I deserve that. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She had this sad, small look in her eyes, like she was waiting for me to throw the next punch, but I was done fighting. You never took responsibility for what you did, I said slowly. Not when you left me. Not when you took off with Bruce. You didn't even have the decency to tell me you were leaving. You just vanished. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. She nodded, her hands trembling a little as she pushed her food around on her plate. I was scared, she said. I didn't know how to leave. I didn't know how to face you. I didn't know how to admit what I had done. I messed up everything, Mike. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. You messed up my life too, you know. For years, I thought it was my fault, that I wasn't enough. But it wasn't me. It was you. And now, I paused, trying to figure out how to finish that sentence. And now I'm just supposed to pretend like none of that happened? She looked up at me, tears pooling in her eyes. No, I don't expect that. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough to fix it back then. I didn't know how to tell you the truth, and I made it worse. I hurt you, and I've hurt so many people in my life. And now, all I can do is try to do better. And I know it doesn't fix anything. I stayed silent for a while, watching her. Her words were hollow, but I couldn't ignore the small part of me that believed she was trying. Even if it was too late. Even if nothing would ever make up for the things she did. Finally, I stood up. I don't know if I can forgive you, Daisy. I don't know if I ever will. But I'll let you stay here. For now. But that doesn't mean everything's okay. Her eyes widened a little, and she nodded. I don't expect it to be. I just need some time. I turned away, my back to her. I couldn't look at her anymore, not while she was apologizing like it meant something now. But I couldn't bring myself to kick her out either. Maybe it was the memories of who she was when we first met, or maybe it was because I understood what it felt like to be broken. I'll give you a place to stay, I said, my voice low, but that's all. Don't get it twisted. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. The tension was still there. It was always going to be there, even if we both pretended it wasn't. We were two people living in the same house, barely speaking, barely trying. And I wasn't sure how long it would take for the weight of all the things unsaid to crush us both. But for now, she was here, and I wasn't kicking her out. And maybe that was enough for today. It had been a week since Daisy arrived, and things were starting to feel normal. I'd go to work, come home, and she'd be in the same spot, on the couch or at the kitchen table, looking like she was still trying to figure out what the hell she was doing here. I didn't want to get too used to it. I couldn't. But there was something in the air, something I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the guilt gnawing at me every time I looked at her. The part of me that wanted to help her, but couldn't completely let go of the anger. I hated how it felt, like I was holding my breath around her. That evening, after a long day of dealing with contractors, I came home to find Daisy sitting on the couch. Her hair was loose, not the mess it had been when she showed up, but still a little disheveled. She was flipping through a magazine, but she didn't seem to be reading it. I could see her hands trembling again. I had started making dinner when she spoke up. Mike, can we talk? I didn't answer right away. I just kept chopping vegetables, avoiding her gaze. About what? About Bruce. I froze. The knife hovered in midair. Of course. The one thing I didn't want to hear about. Her past with him. I hadn't expected her to bring it up so soon. But of course she would. It was the one thing hanging over both of us. It always had been. You don't have to talk about him if you don't want to, I said, my voice flat. I think I do, she replied quietly. I set the knife down, trying to keep my emotions in check. All right, then. What do you want to say about Bruce? She took a deep breath, running her fingers through her hair. She looked like she was gearing up for a confession. I need you to understand how bad it was. How much control he had over me. It wasn't just about the drinking. It was everything else. The way he made me feel small. Like I was nothing without him. I exhaled sharply, trying to hide the frustration bubbling up inside. And now you want me to feel sorry for you? I didn't mean to snap, but the words came out before I could stop them. No, she said quickly, her voice cracking. I just want you to know. I wasn't myself. I wasn't the woman you knew. I wasn't even the woman I wanted to be. I shook my head, leaning back against the counter. You keep saying that it wasn't you. But it was. You left me. You chose him. You chose everything that came with him. Her eyes dropped to her lap. I know. And I hate myself for it. But it was easier to stay with him than face the truth. Easier to believe the lies he told me. I convinced myself I deserved it. That I wasn't worth anything more. Did you ever think about me? The question slipped out before I could hold it back. Did you ever think about how much you hurt me? How much you destroyed everything we had? Daisy winced like I'd hit her with something. Mike. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted that. I just didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to leave him. And by the time I realized I had to, it was too late. Too late. I repeated, my voice rising. You mean when you were already gone? When you were already with him? When you didn't even bother to say goodbye? She swallowed hard, her face pale. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could just stick it out, things would get better. But it didn't. It only got worse. I stood up straighter, my hands balled into fists. And then you just came back here, asking me to forget everything? Asking me to just let you back in. Her eyes were full of regret now, and I saw it. Genuine, raw regret. I never expected you to forgive me. I didn't even expect you to let me stay. But I had nowhere else to go. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to make things right. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My anger was still there, deep down, but something in her voice, something in the way she looked at me, pleading with her eyes, it made it harder to stay angry. You really think you can just fix everything by showing up here? After everything? I said, my voice cold. I don't know, she replied softly. But I'm trying, Mike. I'm really trying. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I turned back to the stove, picking up the knife again, but I didn't start chopping. You don't get to fix things like this. You don't get to come back after all the damage you've done and just expect everything to be okay. I know, she said, her voice barely audible. I don't expect you to just forgive me. I don't even deserve it. But I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to get out of the mess I made. And now, I don't know how to fix it. I sighed, rubbing my forehead. I don't know how to fix it either, Daisy. But I'll let you stay here for as long as you need. Just don't expect anything more. Her eyes met mine, a glimmer of hope in them. Thank you, she whispered. I won't ask for anything more. And for the first time since she walked through that door, I believed her. But that didn't mean everything was okay. It just meant that for a moment, we were two people in the same house, trying to navigate a past neither of us could forget. We both knew the truth. We couldn't go back. The damage was done. But maybe, just maybe, we could start moving forward. One painful step at a time. Daisy's health started to decline faster than I expected. At first, it was just the fatigue. She complained of feeling drained all the time, like she couldn't get enough sleep, but I chalked it up to stress. The last few years hadn't exactly been easy on her. But then the weight loss started. It wasn't extreme at first, just a few pounds, but it was enough to make her look more fragile, less her. I noticed it one evening when I came home from work. Daisy was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a bowl of soup she hadn't touched. Her hands were clasped tightly around the bowl, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Daisy, I asked, stepping into the room. You okay? She glanced up, her eyes heavy with something I couldn't place. I'm fine, she said, her voice a little too soft. Just not hungry. It was then I realized just how pale she'd become, how tired her eyes looked, like she hadn't slept in days. I walked over and sat down across from her, studying her face. You don't look fine. She didn't meet my gaze, but I saw the way her fingers trembled around the bowl. I think I've just been overdoing it lately. Stress. You know, things catch up to you. I wasn't buying it. Daisy, you've been in here for hours, just staring at your food. You're not fooling me. She sighed and finally set the bowl down. I don't feel good, Mike. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I don't know. She wiped her eyes, looking exhausted. Just, everything hurts. I get so tired, and sometimes I can't breathe properly. I'm just worn out. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. When did this start? She hesitated. A few weeks ago. It wasn't so bad at first. But, it's getting worse. And I've been hiding it from you. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. Why? Why the hell would you hide this from me, Daisy? Because I didn't want to be a burden, she said, her voice so small. I didn't want to drag you down with me. You've done enough. You've already given me a roof over my head. I didn't want to add more to the weight you're already carrying. I stood up abruptly, anger bubbling up again. This isn't about me, Daisy. This is about you. You're sick, and I'm not going to just stand by while you don't take care of yourself. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt. I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want you to think I was asking for more than I deserve. Forget what you deserve, I snapped. You deserve to be healthy. You deserve to be alive. And I'll be damned if you think you can go through this alone. She looked at the table, tears welling up in her eyes. Mike, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening to me. I paused. The anger inside me faltered, replaced by something heavier, something worse. Fear. Daisy, I said, my voice softer. You need to see a doctor. I don't want to know, she whispered. I don't want to hear the bad news. I swallowed hard, pushing the emotion back down. You're going. You're not doing this to yourself anymore. You're not hiding this from me, or from anyone else. She didn't argue, and I was grateful for that. She seemed small, lost in her own fear, and I hated seeing her like that. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This wasn't the confident, stubborn person who used to laugh about everything, even the hard stuff. The next morning, I took her to the doctor's office. She didn't say much on the way there, her hands trembling in her lap. I didn't know if it was from fear or just weakness, but it didn't matter. We got there, and I made sure to sit with her through the whole process. Every test, every question the doctor asked, she just nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. When the test results came back, it wasn't good. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with a soft voice, told us that Daisy's symptoms pointed to something much more serious than just stress or exhaustion. It could be cancer, the doctor said quietly, watching Daisy's face for any signs of reaction. We'll need more tests to be sure, but the blood work and scans are showing signs of something we can't ignore. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I looked at Daisy, who sat frozen in the chair, her hands clasped so tightly it looked painful. I'll schedule a biopsy, the doctor said, speaking more to Daisy than to me. We'll know more after that. But in the meantime, I recommend getting plenty of rest. And please, don't wait too long before seeing me again. Daisy nodded numbly, like she couldn't process the words. When we left the office, she didn't say anything. She just walked beside me, her eyes distant, her face pale. Once we were home, I felt a sharp ache in my chest. I didn't know what to say, how to comfort her. I wasn't good at that. I wasn't good at emotions, at being soft, at offering anything more than a solution. But this wasn't something I could fix with a few words or actions. Daisy collapsed onto the couch, her eyes shut tight, as if she could escape the reality that was unfolding in front of her. I'm scared, Mike, she whispered after a long silence. I don't know how to fight this. I don't know if I can. I sat down next to her, not knowing what to say. The words felt like they were stuck in my throat, like I couldn't get past the lump that had formed. But then, slowly, I reached out and put my hand on hers, feeling the coldness of her skin. You don't have to do this alone, I said softly. I'm here. No matter what happens. She squeezed my hand, her eyes closing again, but this time I saw the smallest flicker of relief. For the first time since she came back into my life, I saw her breathe just a little easier. And even though I had no idea what was going to happen next, I knew one thing for sure. We were in this together. A week after Daisy's doctor's appointment, things settled into an uncomfortable rhythm. She was still sick, still weak, and the uncertainty of her diagnosis hung over us like a dark cloud. We didn't talk much about it. She didn't want to hear the word cancer, and I didn't have the right words to offer her. So we existed in this limbo, trying to navigate a world that had shifted beneath our feet. I kept up with work, trying to bury myself in it, but it was hard to ignore the quiet tension in the house. Daisy spent more time in the guest room, resting, reading, doing anything she could to avoid thinking about what the doctor had said. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was in the middle of a project at the house when I heard a knock on the door. It was sharp, insistent. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 3 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I set down the hammer and wiped my hands on a rag, annoyed at the interruption. When I opened the door, I didn't expect to see Bruce standing there. He looked the same big, broad, his face weathered, but still carrying that smug look that had always irritated me. But there was something different about him now. A desperation. His eyes were glassy, his clothes too clean, too sharp, like he was trying to hide something. And I knew, right away, this wasn't a friendly visit. "What do you want, Bruce?" I asked, my voice colder than I meant it to be. He glanced at me, then at the house behind me, his lips curling into a smirk. "I need to talk to Daisy." "Where is she?" I stepped out onto the porch, shutting the door behind me. I wasn't letting this bastard inside. "She doesn't want to talk to you. I'm pretty sure that's the last thing she needs right now." His eyes flickered with annoyance, but he pushed forward. "You don't get to decide that. I'm her husband." I clenched my fists, the familiar anger rising. "You're nothing to her. You never were. And the fact that you're even here, after everything you put her through, says a hell of a lot more about you than you think." Bruce didn't back down. He stepped closer, his face now inches from mine. "You think I don't know what she told you? About me? About our marriage? She left, didn't she? Guess what? I didn't want her to leave either. But that's not the point now. She owes me money, Mike. She's been avoiding me, and I'm not going to let that slide." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of money are you talking about? Because I'm pretty sure she doesn't owe you a damn thing. Not after everything you did to her." He shrugged like it didn't matter. "It's not about what happened. It's about what's mine. You don't get to take what's mine, Mike." I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. "You're seriously going to stand here and talk like you've got any claim on her? You don't. And you're not welcome here. So you can leave, or I can make you leave." His eyes flashed with anger, but he quickly masked it with that fake smile he always wore. "You think you can intimidate me, huh? You don't know who you're dealing with." Before I could respond, the door behind me creaked open. I turned to see Daisy standing in the doorway, looking thinner than I'd ever seen her. She was holding onto the frame for support, her expression tired and distant. "Bruce," she said softly, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" I turned to her, the anger and confusion written all over my face. "Daisy, what the hell is going on? Why is he here?" She looked at me, her face pale, her lips trembling. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want him to come here. I've been trying to get him out of my life, Mike. But he keeps coming back. He's threatening me, and I'm scared." My heart twisted. I'd known she was struggling, but this was something else entirely. I felt my blood boil, but I tried to keep it together, trying not to show the rage rising inside me. Bruce's smirk grew wider as he stepped toward her. "Daisy, baby, you're making this harder than it needs to be. You owe me. And I don't think I'm the only one who's going to make you pay." He reached for her arm, but Daisy pulled back, stumbling as she did. I couldn't stand it anymore. I stepped between them, shoving Bruce away with a force I didn't know I had in me. He stumbled back, his eyes widening in surprise. "Don't touch her." Bruce glared at me, his face turning red. "You think you can just play the knight in shining armor, huh? She's mine, Mike. You can't just take her from me." "She's not yours," I growled, my voice low and menacing. "Not anymore. You lost that right the second you started putting your hands on her. The second you started breaking her down. You have no claim on her." I could see the shift in Bruce's eyes, the recognition that he was no longer in control. For a second, he looked defeated. But then, like a switch had flipped, his face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice trembling with anger. "You both will." I took a step forward, my fist clenched, ready for whatever came next. But just as Bruce moved toward us again, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. His face paled, and he backed up a few steps, suddenly aware of the consequences. "Get out of here," I said, my voice low but steady, "before you make this worse for yourself." Bruce hesitated, then turned around, his fists still clenched at his sides. "This isn't over, Mike," he said under his breath, before storming off down the porch and out of sight. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching him leave, my heart still pounding in my chest. It wasn't over. I knew that. Bruce wasn't done with her. He wasn't done with any of us. But as the sounds of his footsteps faded away, I turned back to Daisy. She was standing by the door, her body trembling. "You okay?" I asked, my voice softer now. She nodded, her eyes wide, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke volumes. The door closed behind us, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what we were both facing. Bruce wasn't just a shadow from her past. He was still very much a part of her present. And somehow, I had a feeling this wasn't the last time he'd come knocking. 3 days after the confrontation with Bruce, Daisy collapsed in the hallway. It was early morning. I'd just come back from a jog, and she was trying to make it to the bathroom on her own. I heard the thud, sharp, sudden, and then the sound of her voice, soft and strained, calling my name. Mike. I ran to her. She was curled on the floor, her face pale as paper, her skin clammy. I scooped her up without thinking and rushed her to the hospital. They admitted her right away. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and the test results from the biopsy had come back. Stage 4. Colon cancer. Spread to her liver. Maybe further. The doctor's voice was steady, almost too calm, like he'd practiced delivering this exact kind of news 100 times. Maybe he had. Daisy didn't say a word as he explained the treatment plan, the odds, the surgeries, the pain. She just stared at the wall, unmoving. I sat beside her, hands clenched into fists on my knees, trying to hold myself together. Later that evening, my mom showed up. I hadn't even called her. She just had that sixth sense, I guess. One look at my face, and she knew it was bad. "Oh, honey," she whispered, wrapping me in a hug I didn't realize I needed. "What do you need me to do?" "Just sit," I muttered. "Be here. Please." The days blurred after that. Daisy underwent surgery to remove part of the tumor. It didn't go well. There were complications, bleeding, infection. I stayed at the hospital with her, sleeping in the chair, drinking terrible coffee, watching nurses and techs come and go like clockwork. I'd never seen anyone shrink the way she did. Her body just gave up, like it had been holding out for too long and finally decided it was done. And yet, somehow she fought. One night, around 2 in the morning, I heard her whispering. I leaned over and realized she was talking to herself, eyes half closed, breath raspy. "I'm not ready," she murmured. "I just wanted a little more time." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You're not done yet, Daisy. Don't talk like that." Her eyes drifted toward me. For a moment, she looked like herself again. "You're still here." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and I meant it. "You should have left me," she said, her voice thin and cracking. "You had every right." I looked away, staring at the monitors beeping behind her. Yeah, maybe I did, but I didn't. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and weak. "I was awful to you." "You were," I said, "but that's not what matters right now." Silence settled between us. A nurse came in, checked her vitals, left without saying much. The light from the hallway cast a pale glow across Daisy's face. Her hair had thinned out since she'd started treatments, and her skin looked like tissue paper. "I don't want to die," she said suddenly. "I know that sounds stupid, but I don't." "It's not stupid," I said. "I thought maybe this was my punishment. For how I treated you. For wasting so much of my life with Bruce. For walking away from everything that was good." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me still wanted to yell at her, to tell her that no, she didn't just walk away, she torched the bridge on her way out. But those feelings didn't have the same weight anymore. Watching her fight to stay alive while her body crumbled, none of the old anger seemed to matter as much. "You're not being punished," I said after a while. "Life just, it kicks people around sometimes." She looked at me, her eyes wet. "Do you hate me?" I took a breath. "No. I did. For a long time. But not now." She nodded, like that was all she needed to hear. A couple of days later, the doctor pulled me aside. "We've done what we can," he said gently. "The cancer's advanced. Her body isn't responding to treatment the way we hoped. You should prepare for the possibility she may not recover." I stood there in the hallway, trying to breathe, trying to think. All I could hear was the sound of the machines from her room, the quiet buzz of voices in the distance, the low hum of overhead lights. When I went back in, Daisy was awake, but barely. My mom sat beside her, reading quietly from a worn paperback. She looked up at me and gave a small nod. She knew too. Over the next few days, the pain management team came in more often. Daisy was on heavier meds, barely lucid most of the time. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, she would say things. Strange, drifting things. "Do you remember that trip we took to the lake?" she asked me once, her voice slurred. "Yeah," I said. "The one where we got stuck in the rain." She smiled faintly. "I thought you'd hate me for dragging you out there." "I didn't," I said. "I liked it." "Another time," she said, "you were the only one who ever really knew me." I didn't reply. I just held her hand. The end came a few days later. It was early morning. The sky outside was just starting to lighten. I was sitting by her side, her hand in mine, when her breathing slowed. There was no panic, no drama. Just a stillness that grew and grew until it filled the whole room. And then she was gone. Just like that. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, staring at her face, wondering how someone could vanish so quietly after everything they'd been through. My mom put a hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Later, after they took her away, I sat in the hospital chapel, alone, thinking. I wasn't sure how to feel. Relief? Sadness? Anger? It was all of it, and none of it. What I knew, though, was that Daisy's death didn't undo the damage she caused. It didn't erase the betrayal or the years of silence. But in those final weeks, something had shifted. We had found a way to look at each other and see something human again. Something broken, but still worth holding on to. She hadn't asked for forgiveness in the end. But maybe she earned a piece of it anyway. It was a gray, quiet morning when I went to visit Daisy's grave. I hadn't gone to the funeral. Her body had been cremated per her request, and the service was small, just a few distant relatives and some folks from the hospital who knew her in those final weeks. I stayed home that day. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to stand in a room full of people pretending they knew who she was, pretending they understood what she went through, what we went through. But now, weeks later, I stood alone at the cemetery, holding a small bouquet of lilies. It felt strange, walking through row after row of tombstones, reading names of strangers whose lives had come and gone just like hers. When I finally reached her spot, I stared at the simple granite marker for a long time before sitting on the bench nearby. "Hey, Daisy," I said softly. "You'd probably laugh if you saw me sitting here, talking to a rock." I set the flowers down gently, brushing some leaves away from the base of the headstone. The engraved dates made it feel real in a way that nothing else had. "You weren't perfect," I continued. "Not by a long shot. And there were times I really hated you. But I guess you already knew that." The wind picked up, brushing through the nearby trees. It was peaceful. Strangely peaceful. "I never thought it would end like this," I said. "You showing up on my porch. Falling apart. And me, letting you in." I shook my head. Part of me still doesn't know why I did. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to see if you'd admit what you did. Or maybe I just couldn't stand seeing you that broken. I looked down at my hands, remembering how small hers had felt near the end, how quiet her voice had gotten, how scared she was. But the thing is, you fought. Even at the end, you tried. And I saw that. I saw who you were before everything went wrong. I stood up and took a deep breath. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "Not like I was. I don't forgive everything. But I don't want to carry this around forever either." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out something I'd been saving for this moment. A folded piece of paper. On it were a few lines I'd written the night she died. Not a letter. Just words. Things I needed to say. I unfolded it, placed it on her grave, and anchored it with a small rock. It was time to let go. After a few minutes, I turned and walked back to my truck. But before I got in, I made one more stop. Just down the path, tucked near a big oak tree, was another grave. Bruce's. Yeah, he didn't make it out of that whole mess. After the cops intervened at my house, he'd been charged with assault and harassment. But 2 weeks later, he was found dead in his apartment. Overdose. Probably something he'd been doing for years. I didn't lose sleep over it. I walked up to his grave and stared at it for a long time. No flowers. No signs anyone had visited. Just a dull, forgotten stone with his name on it. "Rot in peace," I muttered. And then, with no one around, I unzipped my fly and took a long piss right there on his grave. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I just did it. Because for once, I wasn't going to hold back. Not for him. Not for what he did to her. To me. To all of us. When I zipped up and turned around, I noticed a small boy sitting on a bench with his mom not far from the path. He'd been watching me. I walked over, embarrassed but trying not to show it. The mom looked up, tense, probably thinking I was going to say something rude or worse. But I just said, "Hey, sorry if I scared you guys." That was personal business. She relaxed a little, nodding politely. The boy, probably 7 or 8, looked up at me. "Was that your grandma?" "No," I said, surprised. "She was someone I used to know. Someone who was hurting a lot." He nodded solemnly, like he understood more than I expected. "My dad's here," he said, pointing at a nearby headstone. "He died last year." I looked at his mom, who gave a small, sad smile. I'm sorry, I said to the boy. That's a hard thing. Yeah, he replied. But sometimes we visit and tell him about school and stuff. I think he likes it. I bet he does, I said, and I meant it. Before I left, I gave the boy a soft pat on the shoulder and nodded at his mom. Take care of each other. She smiled. You too. As I walked back to my truck, I felt something shift inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was peace. A quiet kind of peace that comes when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to hold forever. I got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the cemetery. And for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel like I was looking over my shoulder. I was finally ready to move forward. A month passed. The house was quiet now. Not the heavy, uncomfortable silence it had when Daisy first moved in, but a gentler kind. The kind that gave me space to think, to breathe. I'd cleaned out the guest room after the funeral, folded the sheets, packed away what little she had left behind. A book, a scarf, a small bottle of perfume that still carried her scent. I didn't throw them out. I couldn't. I just tucked them into a box and slid it onto the top shelf of the hallway closet. I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me wasn't ready to let go completely. Or maybe I just didn't want to forget that she was here, that, for a little while, we tried to make sense of everything we'd ruined. Work helped. I buried myself in projects, taking on more clients, keeping my crew busy. The routine was familiar, comforting. Pouring concrete, measuring frames, lifting beams. All things that made sense. Things I could control. But something had changed. In me. I found myself pausing more often. Taking an extra moment in the mornings with my coffee. Watching the sky change colors before work. Listening when my crew cracked jokes or shared stories. Letting myself feel things I'd ignored for too long. One Sunday morning, I stopped by my mom's place. She was out on the porch watering her plants, her robe tied loose, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked surprised to see me. Well, look what the wind blew in, she said, smiling. Don't get used to it, I replied, walking up the steps. She handed me a mug of coffee like she'd already made one for me, just in case. She probably had. We sat there for a while in silence, watching birds pick at the grass across the yard. Eventually, she said, I'm proud of you, you know. For what? I asked, genuinely unsure. For sticking around, she said softly. For showing up for her when it counted. I know how much that cost you. I stared into my coffee, swirling the dark liquid slowly. I didn't do it for praise. I know, she said. That's what makes it matter. I didn't respond right away. I was still turning that over in my head when she added, You're not the same, Mike. Something's different. I looked at her. Yeah, maybe. I don't know what it is, but I feel lighter. Forgiveness does that, she said, then smiled. Even when it's not complete. That stuck with me for the rest of the day. Later that week, I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at a contact I hadn't touched in years, Daisy's sister, Carla. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. Daisy had pushed her away, said she was judgmental, too controlling, whatever excuse fit the day. But I remembered Carla as someone who had always tried. She didn't deserve to be shut out the way Daisy had done. I called. She answered on the second ring. Hello. Hey, Carla. It's Mike. A pause. Mike. Wow. Hi. I know this is out of the blue, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. But I just wanted to say I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner. She was quiet for a moment. I heard about Daisy. Yeah. I didn't even know she was sick, she said, her voice catching. I would have come. I would have. She didn't want anyone to know, I said gently. I think she carried a lot of shame. Carla sighed. That sounds like her. We talked for a while, nothing dramatic. Just simple, honest conversation. I told her about the final weeks, about the hospital, about how Daisy fought even when it was clear the fight wasn't fair. Carla cried quietly on the other end. She didn't try to blame anyone. She just listened. Before we hung up, she said, Thank you for being there. I mean it. I ended the call feeling clean, like something unfinished had finally closed. The next weekend, I cleared out the old shed behind the house. I'd been putting it off for years, telling myself I didn't have time. But that day, I hauled out the junk, fixed the sagging door, and even started drawing up plans to turn it into a small guest space. I didn't know why. I just wanted something new. Something built not from pain or obligation, but from hope. That night, as I sat in the backyard with a beer, looking up at the stars, I felt it for the first time, peace. Not the fragile kind you tiptoe around, but real, steady peace. Daisy was gone. Bruce was gone. The past would always be there, tucked into the corners of my life, showing up in quiet memories or passing thoughts. But it didn't own me anymore. I'd loved her once, hated her after that. Then, somewhere near the end, I'd seen her again, not as the person I lost, but as someone struggling to find meaning before time ran out. And now, I was ready to move forward. Not to forget. Just to live. With scars, yeah, but with strength too. The kind you only get when you've lost everything and decided to rebuild anyway.